your ability to really sit with and feel and understand your more difficult or more uncomfortable emotions directly correlates to your ability to hold and experience those more elevated or expanded emotions such as love and connection and bliss. And that as soon as you suppress or discount anything, you're automatically suppressing the other end of that pole as well. Because we live in this world of polarity where, for instance, like fear and love, they're kind of opposites, but they're opposites on the same pole. And so if we suppress ourselves from feeling our fear, then we're also at the same time suppressing the amount of love that we can feel as well.
Welcome to Create Love with Carrie Margaret. I'm here to help you find and create the story of you, your authenticity, your love, your life. We live in a shifting culture where men and women don't know how to act, to find authentic self-expression, connection, and love. Let's remove the fear around expressing femininity and masculinity and come to a greater understanding of each other and build connection based on authenticity and attraction and being a team instead of adversaries. There's room for every type of life story and love story. You get to be the hero of your own story. Let me walk with you to create understanding, face fears, deconstruct attraction and passion, heal old wounds and grief, and show up as the person, lover, partner, and friend that you are here to be. Hi there, this is Carrie Margaret, and today I'm here with Greg Moran, who is a very skilled breathwork facilitator and life coach out of San Diego, California. Greg, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. So, Greg has really an amazing story of healing and, a bit of a hero's journey that you went on your own and your own path of integration. And as I see you today, you're really somebody who is bringing out that help and support with integration and healing for so many other people. And like I was saying to Greg before we started today, part of what we do in creating an amazing and great love story is we learn all the different ways to love and have deep intimacy with ourselves. There is the I and I love you is just as important as the you. So, Greg, can you tell us a little bit about the beginning of your wake up, and health and healing story?
Yeah, I'd love to. So my healing journey kind of started back in 2014. This was after college for me, and I had been living a very unhealthy, fairly unconscious lifestyle at that point. Despite being really interested in a lot of spiritual arts and studying different religions and things like that, I had never really integrated a lot of the material that I was accessing. And what initially inspired that research into the spirituality side of things was my experiences with plant medicines back in college. And it wasn't until 2014 when my digestive system started to kind of fail, my health started to decline, and I was eventually diagnosed with ulcerative colitis that it was kind of the universe giving me this choice point to either begin to integrate what I had learned or essentially kind of wither away and die. And so I came to this point of, if there is a way to heal this, God, please show it to me, because I will do anything that it takes at this point. I'm committed to doing the work at this point. And so over the following years, I completely changed my lifestyle, began to implement a really healthy, conscious diet, treat my body in a way that nourished it, that allowed it to heal, began to get into different healing modalities, taking acupuncture, chiropractic adjustment, and massage, and doing these things to help nourish my body. And in the fall and winter of 2017, came across Rick Simpson oil, which is a cannabis oil, very potent cannabis oil. And when I first came across it, I heard about its effectiveness in healing different types of cancer, and looked all over the internet looking for anything having to do with Rick Simpson oil and digestive issues, and came across one testimonial from a woman who said she healed her Crohn's disease with it. And Crohn's is very similar to ulcerative colitis, and so I decided to give it a shot. And so I learned how to make my own oil, and over the following 3 months did the Rick Simpson protocol with the oil, and by the end of those 3 months, my physical body was working perfectly again, healthier than it had been before I even got sick. And it was just this beautiful piece of, like, Mother Nature always provides everything that we need, and provides everything that we need for vibrant health as well, as long as we're willing to take those steps. And another thing that experience with the cannabis oil also showed me was that underneath the physical manifestation of this disease was all of this psycho-emotional stuff, all of these habits, these behaviors, these addictions that I had carried around with me for so long. And it showed me how they were affecting me in my life, how they were affecting those around me, and really brought me to this place of, is this something that I want to continue to bring forward with me? And so it opened me up to kind of the deeper layers of what causes disease or dis-ease in the body. And so since then, since 2018, after that cannabis oil treatment, went on this detox protocol, was detoxing my body from heavy metals and mycotoxins and molds, and just clearing my body out on the smallest levels in the physical. And at the end of that, I happened to come across breath work, and was at this point in my life where I was kind of ignoring the call to speak up and talk about my own healing journey and all this stuff that I'd learned and embodied. And when I came to this point of, all right, universe, I'm ready to answer the call, but I don't know where to go. And I found myself in a breathwork journey a couple days later, and in that breathwork journey got the response that, like, follow this. And so pursued training in breathwork facilitation and have been sharing that for about the last year or so. And it's been this beautiful piece of connecting fully with yourself and diving deep into all of those inner layers, allowing just the most vulnerable parts of yourself to be seen and felt and expressed in the breathwork space. And with that has come just such a powerful reconnection with myself, and it's something that I see in so many others in these breathwork containers, as well as this opening and blossoming into what really lives within them, all of the pain, the fears, the sadness, the traumas, but also all of the love, all of the power, all of the bliss and the beauty and the activations that come from that space as well. So it's been just this beautiful kind of full circle experience of learning that Mother Nature provides everything that we need, and the most powerful thing that she's given us, in my experience at least, has been our breath.
What I love about the illustration of this and what I've seen with you is that I feel that a lot of times when we come into our soul's work and we like really step into purpose, is such an interesting word to put out there, because there's so many ways to really live a purposeful life. And at the same time, when we really kind of connect with something that is this deeper resonance of soul work, then there is this calling, and then there's also this ease, and then where it does like create this really powerful space for other people and how they experience us. Because I have experienced some of Greg's breath work, and I think we did a series of, a few sessions of individual sessions, and it was such a powerful experience, the way that you hold space, the level of integration and everything, the vulnerability that I'm sure has happened in all of your healing journey, because we can only take people as deeply as we've gone, and your ability to sort of just hold this really powerful space. It's you mentioned something related to this too, that other people were having similar experiences. My experience, one of my experiences was like this feeling of like just being completely held in this really safe space with a man. And it is one of the safest spaces that I've ever experienced with a man in the breath work. And that like whatever happened, because in the breath work journey, breath work in my perspective, can be similar to what people might want to go and experience with a psychedelic or plant medicine. And breath work, again, in my perception, my experience, is something that seems a little bit less, like scary, or something where somebody can have a little bit more control of their experience going into it. And while plant medicine can be very powerful, I'm just saying that my perception of breath work is it's really a beautiful step for people who want to do that kind of deep work and want to ease into that a bit more. And so one of the things that happens in breath work is that you don't really know exactly what's going to happen in a journey, and you can set an intention, and then what actually shows up in the journey is going to be different than whatever expectation you might have. And what I really felt is this free thing of going from like, kind of deep pain into, a lot of pleasure and all around the map, and the whole time just feeling completely free and completely held and completely safe. I think that's so powerful for people to be able to experience that when they want to go out and create this great love, to be able to experience the container of, for example, for, the feminine to experience a container of so much safety from a man holding space that way. So, tell us a little bit about, what people are experiencing in breath work and the ways that they can sort of get in touch with themselves and find that vulnerability and the kinds of things that you're experiencing with people.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for sharing your experience as well. It was really beautiful and powerful to hold space for you. So always honored to be able to hold space for another. And in the breathwork spaces, like you said, it can take you very much to those same realms that plant medicine do. The biggest difference is that you're not using anything external to get there. Your body is designed with this hardware to be able to access those, I don't even want to say altered states, because it's a state that's naturally within you, but to access these deeper layers of reality. And in breathwork, as we engage the breathing for the breathwork journeys, we begin to awaken our parasympathetic nervous system and access that parasympathetic nervous system response, which is the part of the autonomic nervous system that's responsible for feelings of rest, of safety, of relaxation in the body. And if you think about when your body does the majority of its healing work, it's in stages of deep sleep where your body is naturally in this parasympathetic state. And so by learning how to awaken that just in our everyday life, in our conscious awakened life, we can allow the body to be in that state for more and more and more of the time that we're alive, essentially. And in the breathwork journeys in particular, with the style of breath that we do, we first awaken the parasympathetic nervous system, and the deeper that we go with the breath, it starts this chain reaction in kind of the chemicals and the hormones that the parasympathetic begins to produce in the body. And as we're doing that, the brain waves are beginning to change as well. And so we're going from a beta brainwave into an alpha, which is akin to a light trance, and then into eventually a theta brainwave, which is that kind of hypnosis, dream state, that shamanic state that a lot of people enter into in plant medicine. And that domain there in the theta brainwave is really the realm of the subconscious. And so we're accessing the subconscious material that we've carried around with us for probably our entire lives, and really getting a unique opportunity to go in there consciously, access what it is that's actually living in there, what's driving us, what's driving these different patterns and behaviors and addictions that we have, and giving us the chance to then decide, is this something that I want to continue with, or is this something that I want to rewrite at this point? And so in doing that, you are literally connecting with the deepest parts of yourself and allowing for those parts to be seen and held in the safe container that you create for them through the breath. And what I'm doing as a facilitator is just holding that space. And so I just guide you into the breath, and then I hold you in that space as you go into those deeper layers and reclaim parts of yourself. And so, one of the kind of pillars of being able to access this work for a lot of people is those feelings of safety. And so before they can allow themselves to go into the breathwork space and unwind in the way that their body naturally does, they first need to feel safe in the external container oftentimes. And so that's another part of my role as a facilitator, is just creating a container that then allows people to feel safe enough to go into those spaces.
That's so powerful. There is a saying that, that we're hurt in relationships and we heal in relationships. And one of the things that I was really thinking about as I was preparing for our interview today was, based on reported numbers, the CDC says it's something like 1 out of 6 women experience sexual abuse before the age of 18, and 1 out of 13. And I think that the male numbers are seriously underreported. So I think this is something that is experienced in a much wider way amongst men as well. And one of the things about, relationships and romantic relationships is one of the differences between friendships is sexuality and the romance. And, we just have, an epidemic of people that have been hurt in sexuality. And then we have a dating culture that is, while I really believe, and it is my desire for you and our experience together to start to create your own dating culture, so you create the exact culture that you want around you. The overall larger social dating culture can be, there can be a sense that somewhat's like casual or disposable. And so I think a lot of people are being hurt within the realm of dating and sexuality too, like how much of sexuality is feeling really safe and how much of romance is feeling safe. So, we have all of these people that are walking around with different levels of hurt and woundedness. And, one of the really powerful things about this container is, it's really my belief that we can show up and do our work and create our vision and create our intention, and then, allow other people to meet us where we are at, right? And one of the powerful things that we can do as we're creating our own love story, and really love story with ourselves, with our life, with our, romantic partner, is this deep healing work and this deep sense of safety. So I don't know if you want to share, and like little stories that you can share related to that in terms of people's experience of that, of being in that safe container with the masculine and levels of healing. Like I said earlier, I experienced a healing that happened related to a previous romantic sexual experience where I was feeling really disempowered. And within my own journey, and it's very much like you said, it's the subconscious that is coming out. And a lot of me, like, afterwards was feeling like a little bit self-conscious about things that came up in the journey, because it's this subconscious almost game that you start to play along the subconscious, like, what does the subconscious want to show to me? And I actually started to, as my cells got really filled with oxygen, I started to feel my body, my hands, my feet, my legs, in a way, my all of, like, everything, everything from my feet, legs, vagina, belly, chest, arms. Like, I just felt fully alive, and all the oxygen pumping through my whole body. And I almost felt animal-like cat, like empowered, and in my own female, like, sexuality, and feeling like this, and like kind of empowered feline large cat crawling around, owning my own space and really owning my own boundaries within my sexuality. A lot of us who have experienced things related to sexual hurt or romantic hurt, has to do with like us not being in the full sense of our own boundaries and our own desire and our own consent, and something that's feeling really honoring of us. And what was really powerful within this journey is, and I honestly don't remember the intention that I set. I just remember that is what happened. First, the pain started to come up, and then the empowerments. And, it was a very powerful experience for me. And I'm just wondering, like, how many, what are you finding that's a common thread with people in their breathwork experiences and people having experiences like this, so we can share with our audience, so they can see this as another tool for them to really have a different experience. I think one of the really powerful things that plant medicine, or, even, this isn't plant medicine, but MDMA and treating trauma, with MDMA has been being used right now to treat post-traumatic stress disorder, and with therapists. And one of the things is it's creating this new embodied experience. The MDMA will create a new embodied experience when somebody goes into trauma, and so they can experience in their body something different, a different state than what they were experiencing and kind of stuck in fight or flight in the sympathetic nervous system. So what kind of states and experiences? Like I said, I had an experience where I first went into the difficulty and the hurt and sort of the tears and all of this, and then came out as this, like, it's almost like a puma, and I was comfortable, like I was, the breath work was set up so you can move all around, and I had a blindfold over my eyes, in total trust that, Greg was guiding me and setting the container. And I started to feel like I wanted to move, and like just move all around like this big puma, and just be in my fully feel all of my cells, and almost this like sexual energy move through in a way that where I felt boundaried and I felt empowered. And I kind of felt giggly after it, because, and it was, when I was like sharing, I was like, oh, that was a little bit, that was a little weird, and, Greg, you just like completely held space for me, and it was like, that was a beautiful thing to hold space for. And you allowed me to move out of the giggliness, you know what I mean, of like the subconsciousness, into like, oh yeah, Carrie, you deserve to have in yourselves that sexual energy, that vital life force energy, like move through your cells and and be in your power and be in your boundaries. And there are a whole lot of other lessons that came from that one and from other journeys, probably more that we can go into in the full interview today. One of them was actually dance, and which is beautiful, and female embodiment and being able to really express the feminine. What are you experiencing, people experiencing in this in terms of coming into contact with themselves?
I don't know if there's necessarily a common thread that ties the experiences of all these different people together, other than it's the breathwork is revealing to you what's living beneath the surface. And so sometimes in journeys, and oftentimes with women, one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I've gotten at the end of journeys is that this is the first time that I've felt safe enough to allow this part of me to express in the presence of a man. And it's regardless of like relationship status of the woman or anything like that. Like some of them have partners, some don't, but have had previous partners. And just hearing that this is the first time they felt this safe in the presence of a man, as a male myself, is deeply humbling, and just has me kind of reflecting on like, wow, this work is so powerful, and fills me with gratitude for being able to offer those spaces to people. Another piece of, particularly with women, is like you said, this reclamation of this sexuality, of this embodied presence and play, and kind of accessing these different energies that are very suppressed and have been for a very, very long time in the feminine, of just allowing her to be fully human and fully her expressed self. And so it can show up in a lot of different ways in a breathwork journey, because your body unfolds in a unique way unlike anybody else's. And so sometimes it's dancing, sometimes it's like what you were describing, this kind of lioness or tigress. Sometimes it's very subtle, but what's happening on the internal landscape is very profound. And so just being able to hold space and allow for whatever that process looks like to just unfold in the way that it naturally and organically wants to, because your body ultimately knows exactly what you need in that moment. And I also want to touch on this other piece of your experience. You described going through this pain, and on the other side was the empowerment. And that is so often the case, that the things that we are kind of pushing down or suppressing or hiding from, it's when we go into those and really open ourselves up to feeling them, that allows for that empowerment, for that reclamation, the activations and the medicine that lives inside those emotions to really be accessed and embodied. And so in the breathwork space, it's regardless of whether somebody is having like a sexual reclamation or some other type of experience, I guess the thread that ties them all together is it's a reconnection with a pure part of themselves that they maybe have not had access to for a very long time.
That's really beautiful. And what was, as I was listening to you, what came up to me was the word intimacy. And that it is a beautiful and safe way to experience the power of healing intimacy in terms of you know, my experience of Greg, and, you know, in our community, everybody's experience of Greg is like, you're just a very boundaried and a respectful man in terms of like holding the container. So I'm not blurring any lines here. What I'm talking about is like actually intimacy in its most powerful way is boundary. But this sense of like this intimacy with a healer, where we are able to touch these most innocent places and be witnessed in it. There's a lot of work that I've, done myself and in many different containers, too many teachers to talk about, that talk about the importance of the witness and just being really witnessed. So being held safely and being witnessed, in our innocence and in our, desire to be expressed. And I think it brings a lot more power than like going through that experience on your own. Having the safe container, the witness, the level of intimacy that you can experience between healer and client, and it's still a powerfully intimate experience, especially dancing amongst masculine and feminine energies for, women that have, never experienced that kind of safety before. I want to ask you about your experience with men in breath work. We have some friends in common, and and lots of people that have come to you in their different healing journeys. And one of the things that's really powerful, we've had so many conversations. One of the reasons that I wanted to bring Greg on right away about all different dynamics in healing and really finding this level of trust and vulnerability, intimacy with ourselves, and being on a fully expressed path, and also in all these dynamics between men and women, and what it feels like to grow up as a man and a woman. And one of the things that we've talked about is this, and a lot of people seem to be addressing this thing of like men, how many men are showing up to seminar rooms, to healing circles, to breathwork stuff, to all of the different things for whatever reason. Usually when you go to rooms, there's more women than men in the rooms. And so we've had some really powerful conversations about even what men face as they start to go and do their work in terms of like larger social things and social dynamics and addictions. Like there's lots of, I don't know that this is the space today to go down the wormhole of like pornography, for example. And there is, because I have a feeling about that has so much to do with sort of intentionality behind it. And there's a lot of people where that is an outlet and kind of addiction, and there is an underlying, like feeling of addiction there, right? And so there are men that are experiencing porn addictions, or men that are experiencing, lack of like ability in terms of it being okay to completely express themselves in a way where that they feel safe to express themselves sexually, or as a man in culture, or in masculine energy. So I put a lot of things in what I was just talking about. One thing that I'm really curious about is either like what you're experiencing as men come into circles with you, or into breath work, or also this, if you're feeling like called in our conversation to go in a space of like how we can really meet men, and support them in their journey in terms of, and their work, and be a space of encouragement and healing for men. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. I love seeing men in the breathwork space and in the healing space, and I will also say that what you said seems to be accurate, at least in my perception of it as well, is that it's primarily women showing up to breathwork journeys, to healing circles and things like that. And there definitely seems to be less men entering into these spaces. And it's something that I've seen in a lot of different things play out in my life, of like women almost leading the charge and men being kind of either dragged along or lagging behind in some way. And so when I see men enter into the breathwork space, I make a point to go up to them, most likely after the journey, and just again thank them for coming and doing this work, and encourage them to continue with this work, whether it's in the breathwork with me or just along their own individual path. But like, thank you for doing this work, because it is so needed and so powerful. And in the breathwork spaces, a lot of times what I see with men, and I don't want to blanket statement anything like that, but a lot of it is this armor that men have held for so long of like, I have to, like, crying isn't manly, I can't express emotions, I can't allow these deeper layers of myself to really be seen. And so initially what I see in a lot of men is a lot of resistance in the breathwork journey, and a lot of tightness and clenching and like holding on in the body. And when they finally let go and relax and just allow those walls to fall, the transformations that occur are so powerful, because it's something that they've been holding on to for so long. And when they finally soften, that flower that they have within them is able to kind of almost like break up through the concrete of the sidewalk and begin to grow. And so it's this really powerful thing, and something that I love seeing is like men coming into the breathwork space as well. And most of the time people don't really have, like, I send out a video beforehand that kind of explains what's happening on the subconscious level and all the different layers of the breathwork. But like any plant medicine ceremony, you kind of go in with like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm here for it. Mm-hmm. And so just seeing them have these really powerful experiences has also been really powerful and healing for me as well, as a man, to be able to hold space for that and allow for this other man to be authentic and vulnerable and to allow their emotions to express, is something that I feel men as well don't have a safe container for that, just as much as women feel they don't have a safe container for that.
Oh, that is so powerful. It's really interesting. I was just having a conversation with a coach yesterday, and many of our circles are amongst like coaches and people in personal development. And he was saying to me, he had gone through this men's work, and he was saying that in the men's work, that they were teaching the men to look for other men to go and support each other and not look for their woman for support. And as somebody who's been a great supporter both of like women and also men, I like to create, I'm so blessed to have so many beautiful male friends. And one really important thing, once I learned the experience for men of how unsafe vulnerability could feel, I just felt like I wanted to be a safe space for every man in my life, that, when I say that they could come to me with, or any level of vulnerability, that I stand by it. So frequently women will go into the space of like, I want you to be vulnerable, I want you to show your emotions, and then when a man does it, like not accept it in wider cultural senses. Not so much in our circles, but in our healing circles, because we are in circles of people that have gone in to do huge, deep amounts of work. But in wider circles, and all the circles are fine. Whatever is happening in your life, in your experience, it's like being with that experience. I do want to like say it's really important to be in the acceptance and the surrender, and then allowing us to grow, right? And as a woman, once I realized like this weight that men were carrying on their shoulders, I really wanted to become a safe woman in men's lives. So I've experienced that, where it's like, how can I create the safe container? And it's funny, one of the coaches saying, it was like, when you do that, you just ruin any polarity. Or, like you've ruined when you like allowing, then you're like the mother. Mm-hmm. Then you're the mother, then you're the good male friend. I'm curious about that, because you're such a powerful person to ask about that in particular. So many of us women that are on this path of really showing up to ourselves, and also like showing up in devoted ways to the masculine. What are your thoughts on that? and in terms of in terms of the way that women show up to men too, in creating that safety and vulnerability?
Yeah, I feel like that's a really powerful question. I definitely feel that it's important for men to have communities of men that they can safely express what it is that they're feeling inside without kind of having it not validated or judged or different things like that. Just having that space held, having their emotions and their different desires and things like that validated can be really deeply healing, and also allow them to realize that there's something underneath those desires as well, and what is that deeper piece, rather than, I think you touched earlier in this conversation about this kind of dating culture where people are just very casual and there's no commitment and all of that. And I think this kind of ties in with the same theme of not being able to safely express their desires in an authentic way with another person, and so therefore the desire stays at that surface level and they never actually go deeper into it. But when there's that authentic inquiry into the desire and sharing that piece, those emotions with another person, especially when it starts to, or when there's emotions such as like guilt or shame or fear or grief or anything like that, being able to share that with another person and be met in that space allows you to get beneath the desire. And what is it that I'm really desiring in wanting to maybe have these casual relationships or something like that? What is it that these are fulfilling within me that I'm not fulfilling within myself? And having men be that space holder for other men can be really powerful, because like you said, it's easy for a woman in a relationship to kind of take on that mother archetype, especially if that man doesn't have a strong support system of other men and brothers to hold him in that space, to hold him accountable in a loving, gentle way, not in a totalitarian dictator kind of way, but to allow him to have his expression and his experience, but also there to remind him and lift him up when he is maybe having a moment of weakness, rather than the man kind of falling, I don't want to say falling, rather than him relying on his partner to be able to lift him out of those spaces over and over and over again. Like, that is definitely an important piece in relationship for both people, to be able to be the rock for the other. But what's coming through right now is it takes a community. And so just like raising a kid can be very difficult, especially for single parents, and these dynamics that we have so often in our modern world. If we look back to indigenous societies, it was the entire community that raised all the kids. It was the community that held everybody in that community within that community. And so, yes, having those maybe difficult conversations with your partner, allowing you to both be vulnerable and authentic and express what is truly within you, and be able to hold that space as well, to be met however the outcome of that expression is, but also not fully relying on them and relying on your external community as well, knowing that everybody's going to carry a different perspective and a unique viewpoint on the situation, because we so often find ourselves or see ourselves in each other. And so, for instance, like you sharing an experience, I might be able to relate to that experience, but from my own unique perspective. And so I greatly believe that diversifying the people that you're able to go to allows for many different perspectives to be received in that kind of healing process.
And I'm really curious, I'm not sure if this is something you've thought about, or it just naturally coming up in the conversation. I'm really curious, it's how we can create more of this culture for our men. And I say our men, for me, it's our men and our women, and this is our culture. And it's, as people that are interested in healing and interested in sort of the evolution of us being able to be really fully expressed and to be healed and to be, you know, like whole people. You know, have you like thought of like how we can build more of those support systems for our men? Because maybe you are seeing it like, you know, socially, you know, across the map. I, at this point, am not seeing these levels of, I do see like, you know, there's camaraderie around sports, and there is, you know, bonding that happens like through those kind of physicality kinds of experiences. And I'm not seeing a lot of experiences where it feels like men are being allowed to be the whole version of themselves. And what is, for me, really, I see all of us as we're like these individual, you know, like flowers and unique expressions. You know, like some people are like an oak tree and other people are like a, you know, a lily flower, and somebody else is like a, you know, a rose. And like in your real unique expression, one of the things that I see that is so beautiful for me to witness is how your life has brought this level of wholeness within you, of healing and balancing out masculine, feminine sides, of coming into, we're all evolving in the journey. You know, we never get there. Like coming into your own sense of wholeness. So somebody who's on this path and supporting men and women, like, do you have any ideas of how to support more of our, I mean, you already mentioned when we do see a man in a seminar room or, you know, like encouraging him to do the work. Any other ideas in terms of building this culture where men are supported amongst men and are able to, what you talked about being able to be in, you know, look at things like desire and like underlying things below that, if there's like any kind of guilt or shame or all these loaded feelings, and being able to sort of unpack that stuff is so powerful. And I think one of the driving issues, it's like we brought up the porn addiction. I think that while sex can be a beautiful expression without any shame, I think there is an undercurrent of shame that is inherent in a lot of porn addiction. In the like act itself, I've done, you know, I don't know who to credit for this because I've done so much reading and research in all of these themes, but in the act itself of like watching pornography where somebody's a voyeur, unless that really feeds into their fantasy of like being the voyeur, like there's an inherent thing in the act of like, I can't be in the act, I only get to watch it. You know, and you know, that brings a level, it might even be Jordan Peterson, who I don't want to mislabel who brought that up, but like there's an inherent, you know, undercurrent sometimes that falls through the thing with porn, and, you know, like adult entertainment and exploring sexuality within itself. There can be the whole range of what people want to experience there. So it's not about labeling a particular experience as right or wrong. It's really kind of like this undercurrent of what is somebody actually feeling in terms of in that moment, right?
Yeah. And especially like what is it that they're seeking to fulfill in maybe engaging with whatever that addiction is. Like for myself, in my past, porn was definitely a big addiction for me. And in moving through that, like I was aware of the addiction at a certain point, and I still had a very difficult time breaking that addiction or stopping that behavior. And it was during the cannabis oil treatment that I did. Cannabis oil can be a potent plant medicine, especially in that cannabis oil form. And so it showed me these deeper layers of what is it that, first of all, what is this doing in my life? Is this actually benefiting me in any way? And I realized that it wasn't. I already knew that it wasn't, but I felt it on a whole different level. And so it gave me that direct felt experience of what the impact of that was. And then also just inquiring into, well, what is the desire then that is not being met that I'm attempting to meet in this addiction? And so often it's just a desire to be loved and to love yourself ultimately. And so whatever the addiction is, I believe it's Gabor Mate who talks about trauma and addiction, and that no matter what the addiction is, the underlying trauma more or less is going to be this feeling of disconnection from yourself or from a parental figure that started as a really, really young child on something that's seemingly inconsequential, but the child can't tell the difference, and so that gets stored within them, and then this feeling of disconnection from self and the world is not necessarily safe for me to be my authentic self leads to these shadow aspects that build and build over time that then begin to manifest as different addictive tendencies or behaviors or patterns. And so in kind of getting honest with yourself, you really want to begin to inquire and like not be hard on yourself or anything like that, but to just get curious and start asking questions of like, okay, well, I noticed this is in my life, and so going deeper into it, what need am I attempting to fulfill with this? And it's a very vulnerable place to be, and yet it can lead to maybe the insight or the experience that you need to be able to make that transition and begin to move from that space of kind of addictive tendencies into more of a aligned and whole state of being. And I don't quite remember what the original question was. I think it was about the undercurrents of
masculine support. And
Yeah.
I really like where the conversation is going. And I want to do a little bit of like just a detour in terms of the feminine here, because I think that this inquiry that we're in, or talking about this, is really powerful for people. I think there's a lot of energy there, and I imagine there are certain women that, or for men as well, that like listening to the conversation could bring up different levels of trigger there. So I want to just like honor other people's experience. And also I know, there is experience. It's my perception. I don't have data to back this up in this moment, but from numbers that I've looked at, that porn tends to be like driven more by like men than women, right? There's a pretty large number difference. So there are women that enjoy it, or use it as well, and they're across like all the spectrum. And there are certain women where it's like, if a man is using porn when he's in a relationship with her, where she feels like she's not enough for him. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of this thing of like, women feeling, triggering this sense of not enoughness or a wound within in terms of porn use. Mm-hmm. So, I think where I wanted to go with that in terms of this conversation is looking at like the vulnerability of sort of like the conversation on like both sides. So, men in terms of what they're actually looking to go and experience, and then like women on on the other side here, like there's some women that consider that within their frame. And again, we get to create our own beautiful love story. So we get to create the parameters of what feels good for us in a relationship. And there are certain women that feel that that's infidelity, that there are lots of different, some women feel like it's play, or it's variety, there's all different sort of viewpoints on that. And what any thoughts do you have in terms of your experience with like, or your thoughts about the feminine in this kind of juggernaut of pornography?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's so interesting, and this is where I feel that open and authentic and honest communication is so necessary in relationships, because oftentimes that part of maybe a man's life is kind of not talked about or kind of in the shadows in a sense. And I know that it was for me. And yeah, it in women it definitely can create this feeling of not enoughness and trigger all of those wounds of I'm not worthy enough, I'm not good enough, all these different things, and take it personally. And I can only speak from my own experience, of course. In the relationship that I was in at the time when I was moving through this addiction, it had nothing to do with my partner. And if anything, the fact that I had a partner made me feel more guilty and more shameful about engaging in the pornography and accessing that. And so that's one of the things that I've really had to sit with and heal post-relationship is this, like, almost feeling like I had not only failed myself, but failed my partner or let my partner down in the relationship because this addiction was present. And so again, I feel like it comes to open, authentic communication and also this inquiry into like what need is wanting to be met here by me going into this. Like I have a loving partner, so why do I continue to come back to this in this cycle that seems to just keep perpetuating? What is the underlying theme here? And it's in like going into that and really getting honest with yourself about what that might be that ultimately gives you that opportunity to move away from that behavior if you find that it's not serving you and move towards behavior that is more aligned with who you authentically are and what you want to experience, what you truly desire to experience in life. Because what I found in my own life is that when I let that go, I actually never really wanted to have experiences like that in the first place, that it was this feeling that I wanted to have in my body of like honestly just being able to feel my body, because for so long I was numb to a lot of things, and so it was something that provided me with some type of sensation that I could feel, and it felt like an emotional sensation in the body, a physical sensation obviously, but it felt like there was something deeper when I accessed those. And then in the aftermath, there would be all the guilt and the shame that would arise that is so common with addictive tendencies. You know, the act itself gives you this sense of pleasure and relief and this feeling of connection, even if it's not authentic. And then in the aftermath, there's the shame of like, oh, I've done it again kind of thing. And so really just analyzing and going into, feeling into what is the underlying intention with this act, and just bringing the intention into it can make a huge shift in just how you show up in the world, how you show up when you notice a pattern repeating itself. Like, intention allows for that choice to then be made, because intention brings your conscious awareness into the moment, and then that allows for a choice to be made, whether it's the same choice or a different choice.
This is very powerful. And another really powerful thing in there in terms of the what was really being like seeked, at least in your experience, that I picked up is like the feelings of like love and being loved, and like really feeling your body when you were feeling more numbness in your body. And one of the things that I've experienced in my own growth journey, you know, I love relationships, and you know, as somebody who's in heterosexual relationships, I really wanted to understand men's experience. So I've really dived deep into like, what is the male experience in a male body and within our culture. And of course, I can't know that from my own personal experience 100% because I was born in a female body in this culture. And so I think like one of my favorite kind of Einstein quotes was, it's something like, you know, if you have 100 minutes to solve a problem, take 99 minutes to understand the problem and 5 minutes to solve it. And in part of my journey of like what really creates beautiful, loving relationships between men and women, it's really like understanding the perspective in each perspective and what's going on, not just within the relationship, but what's going on in terms of our lived experiences. And I found it almost shocking to find that the level of suppression of feelings for men leads to a lot of numbness. And it's very common. It's very common for men to say, I don't even feel anything from like the neck down. And so that is a tremendously common cultural experience. So it's not surprising to me to find that like in that all of a sudden it's like I wasn't feeling my body, it felt numb. And then in this experience, I get to feel my body, right? And then another thing that was powerful for me in that is that I really I didn't understand as a woman. And I'm still coming into the full understanding of it because and in this whole journey is like how much physicality means love for men, how much like a physical touch, like the thing, sexuality and touch. So hugs, physical touch, most men, their top love languages are, most of them, not all, are physical touch and words of appreciation. And for a lot of men, like if it's very uncommon, like common in this space of relationships and helping people build healthy relationships, that in marriage, when you start to talk to people that have gone through divorces, you'll hear a lot of stories on the male sides of like ending up in sexless marriages. And, sometimes the female perspective that I've heard in an undercurrent is like, well, the man should be trying harder in the relationship and he, can kind of like suck it up if there are periods of time without sex in the relationship. And one of the things is that like I've really come into a deep understanding of is that for a lot of men, like being in a romantic situation where there's not the physical touch, and not always. Sex is such a broad term. It's not just penetration. There's so many things within sexuality, but being kind of being without that physical touch can feel like feeling deprived of love. And even like for a lot of, we'll do this on another podcast and I'll save that for that space. But even for a man being able to be like really like adored in his genital area too. It feels like love in that. Now there is a difference between when we're just in a casual space, right? And now for women, versus in this kind of like loving relationship. And I'm not going to go off on that tangent in this moment. And what I found so interesting is for you to label that like underneath the current, like that undercurrent, like that experience of feeling loved and being loved, and how much like sometimes it almost feels like culturally we separate sex from love in the sense that like it is, now that we're in this relationship or this marriage, it's like sex should kind of come like secondary or something like that. Like it's the commitment and the emotional bond. And it is the commitment and the emotional bond, and also the sexuality and the physical touch is just a space where I believe in a feminine body, from my exploration, that men tend to find a lot of like love in that sense of being adored.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that that's the case for me as well. And in terms of like relationships and stuff like that, and I guess there's a couple different things that I want to touch on here. One of which is what you said, like the Einstein quote of, if you have an hour to solve a problem, spend 55 minutes understanding the problem, 5 minutes solving it.
Oh, that's great. It probably was an hour, not like 100 minutes. That sounds more like the quote.
And so, and so it's funny because I heard that for the first time like the other day.
So
it's beautiful that it's coming back. But understanding what is actually not necessarily problem, but like what is it that I truly want and desire, and what is my like true authentic expression, and being able to really understand that is so powerful, because then we're able to bring that and communicate that authentically into a space of relationship where the other person is hopefully able to mirror that with their own authentic experience and expression. And in that way, like you're continuously deepening the relationship and strengthening the bond between you two, even if necessarily you don't, like, the relationship doesn't necessarily always stay together, because sometimes you realize that your authentic desire is going in another direction, but you're at least staying connected to yourself in that space and staying true to yourself. And if the love is true, then that will be mirrored in, okay, well, I love myself and I know what I want, and I love them and I know what they want. And so if that's different things, then if the relationship goes in a different direction, or the two people in the relationship go in a different direction, then there's still that connection with self that is the core of relationship. And for men in particular, and women as well, I've seen both in the breathwork space, there's this piece around feeling numb in the body or feeling disconnected from certain emotions, which always mean that you're disconnected from some part of yourself. And the analogy that I like to give before breathwork journeys, when I'm describing the emotional aspects of what could arise in a breathwork journey, is think of the human emotional experience like a tree, and the roots have to dig deep into the ground, and those are maybe the heavier emotions. But the deeper that the roots go into the darkness, the higher that the branches can rise up towards the light. And so both are necessary, and your ability to really sit with and feel and understand your more difficult or more uncomfortable emotions directly correlates to your ability to hold and experience those more elevated or expanded emotions, such as love and connection and bliss. And that as soon as you suppress or discount anything, you're automatically suppressing the other end of that pole as well. Because we live in this world of polarity where, for instance, like fear and love, they're kind of opposites, but they're opposites on the same pole. And so if we suppress ourselves from feeling our fear, then we're also at the same time suppressing the amount of love that we can feel as well. And so that's where the power of authentic vulnerability and communication comes into play in relationships, because so often, at least in my experiences in the past, when relationships have ended, it's, both partners play a role in it, but taking responsibility for my own role, it's always a lack of communication on my part of what I'm actually feeling or experiencing, or an inability to express myself in a way that I feel safe to express myself. And sometimes it's made up, sometimes it's legitimate, but it's like that feeling of safety has to be there to allow for that to, and to allow for that relationship to maintain presence. Because if we start suppressing things or not communicating things to the partner, then that just builds and builds and builds, and pretty soon we have walls between us. And that's where so many relationships, they fail because of communication breakdowns. And so being able to just stay open to that authentic communication and listening and actually hearing your partner, while also standing in what you feel to be true for your own experience as well, and holding all parts of it, being able to and honor all parts of it. I don't remember what the original question was.
Yeah,
but.
well, it's been a really flowy conversation, and it's been great. I mean, part of the thing in terms of me coming on to the world with the podcast was to start to record some of the conversations that I was just having, and allow other people to experience the depth and the richness and all of that, and ponder on how that may be helpful or healing in their own lives. So so we kind of went off on that thread, and that was really beautiful. And it reminded me of what we were talking about right before we started about this this space of being completely present in a relationship and then holding vision at the same time. So like the presence, being able to be present and completely connected. And then the vision piece is, I also call it like commitment, because it's like commitment to our own vision, and then like commitment to a joint vision. It's like we can't commit to a joint vision if there's no joint vision, if each person wants something different. So allowing it to be okay in that journey to us really speak our truth, and to find people that resonate with our truth that we can build a vision with, that are looking to commit to a similar future. So I think that's really, really powerful. And sort of that first step, it brings us kind of full circle. Like really the first step in being able to create that is being in complete resonance with yourself and what you're actually desiring, who you actually are, where you actually want to go. And that can shift as we grow and change. All of this stuff can shift. I'm curious, as we kind of start to tie up our conversation, I'm curious, like, is there anything that that people don't know about you, and whether it's with like breath work or just about you in general, that you would like to share in the context of our conversation?
This is a good question. I feel that I'm a fairly open book for the most part. There's nothing that immediately comes to mind. I guess one of the things that comes to mind is birds. And so it's not something that I talk about very often, but I absolutely love birds and listening to birds, learning about birds, and just in my own journey, like in kind of exploring like naturalist trainings and things like that. I've spent a lot of my adult life working in outdoor education and naturalist realms, and just my love for birds has taught me so much about just like listening and being present and in the moment. And so it's funny because I feel like it's fairly uncommon, and therefore I don't necessarily mention it all that much, other than like a few times here and there to somebody who may be with me. But that's kind of what comes up is just like a love for birding.
I love that. And you know what I want you to do? Can you share with our listeners your the magical story about birds and what they do in the dawn? You see, Greg and I both picked the word, magic for this year's intention. And we were having a conversation shortly after the new year, and where you told me this story about like what birds do in the dawn. And I was like, well, that's pretty magical. It was the first magical story of the new year. So
back when I was living up in Washington State, I took this naturalist training course that a somatic wilderness therapist turned me on to because of my expressed interest in like deepening into kind of indigenous wisdom and ways of relating to the earth. And in this naturalist training course that he turned me on to, it's developed by indigenous trackers from around the world. And there's a big piece of this training is all about learning the birds and listening to the birds. And there's this part where they're talking about the two most powerful times to learn the birds or to be around birds is in sunrise and sunset, but particularly sunrise because there's a lot less activity from humans. It's a lot quieter, and so you can really hear the birds, because at sunrise and sunset all the birds will begin to make calls, and they'll all do their own little noises, and everybody's waking up for the day. And the book talks about like these scientists trying to understand, why do the birds do this at sunrise? Why do they do this? And they're doing all of these tests to see what's happening inside the brain and what switches and all these are turning on and off. And the indigenous trackers in the book are like, if they just put their tools down for for a moment and just listened, they would realize what it was. And when the sun is rising and the birds are singing, they're waking up for the day, realizing that they had made it through another dark night and that they're here to live another magical day on this planet. And so it's a celebratory chorus that happens every sunrise. And so I haven't done this for a while, but one of my practices when I first moved down to San Diego was taking a sunrise walk and learning all the different birds every single morning. And so after doing that consistently, like just learning which birds live where they build their nests, where they find their food, all the different things like that. But that piece just felt really profound to me, of like every morning after they've made it through another dark night where they didn't know if they were necessarily going to make it, the sun is rising again, the light is coming back to the world, and they're celebrating because they get to live another day.
So much beauty in that story. I know that I've lived a few dark nights of the soul, and the celebratory moment of I get to live this new beautiful day and celebrate after going through the darkness is pretty powerful. Yeah. And a lot of what I want to share with you in terms of any dark nights of the soul that you've gone through with your life and your romance and the ability to be reborn.
Yeah, and again, coming back to this piece around like emotions and allowing ourselves to feel the emotions, it's in going into those emotions, especially the difficult ones that maybe people call dark night of the soul or something like that, but going into those difficult emotions, on the other end is always love and freedom. And so the only, like something that Kaya Lei, the founder of the Sacred Breath Academy that I studied under, something that she says is the only way out is through. And so going into those emotions, that is where you find your own love, your own freedom, your own expansion.
Oh, that's beautiful, Greg. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
What for you is great love?
What for me is great love? What comes up is just allowing just all parts of myself to be in the space, all parts of the other to be in the space, and to just dance and play in whatever that looks like in the moment. And so whether that's messiness and crying and tears and things like that, or like laughter and love and play and sexuality, and like just kind of being able to be in that space with another person. And like what you were saying earlier, having somebody to witness you can be an incredibly powerful experience in terms of, like, for instance, healing work is what you're talking about, but to be able to share that experience with another person, that full authentic experience where you're both dying into each moment, that is to me what great love is. And it doesn't necessarily have to be with a romantic partner. When it is, it's beautiful, but it can also be with friends, with community, with family. Just fully being alive in the full spectrum of the human experience.
I love that so much. I feel like we've experienced some of those moments of real beauty and connection. And just want to acknowledge you for, being an incredible human being, for really being a leader in your journey and your own integration in healing and going into all of those deep places and going through and now holding space for other people and really being an incredibly safe man to be around for men and women alike, and being part of this beautiful movement that I really see as men integrating their divine masculine, their divine feminine, and really creating new models going forward. So I just really want to acknowledge you for all the work that you have done and the beautiful healing that you hold, the space you hold for other people to heal themselves. And I would like, how would people get in touch with you, and what kind of things could they learn in your world?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for that reflection, Carrie. And it's such an honor to know you as well and to be invited onto this podcast. It's a great privilege, and I'm deeply grateful to be here.
Thank you.
If people want to work with me, whether in life coaching or breath work, or there's a couple other offerings that I have, the best ways is probably to either go to my website, which is truehealthawakening.com, or to go to my Instagram, where I do a lot of advertising for different events and workshops and things like that, which is, the handle is @truehealthawakening. And so one of those two is probably the best way to get a hold of me, to either join a breathwork container. I do in-person and online breathwork ceremonies. And so if somebody doesn't live in San Diego, you can always request or sign up for a virtual breathwork journey. I also have life coaching containers that you can sign up with through the website, schedule a free discovery call, and we can talk about if this is a good fit for you, how I can best support you throughout the container. And it's all centered around nervous system regulation, using breath work and different integration and embodiment tools to be able to just step more fully into your authentic self, your authentic expression, and begin to align your life with that authenticity that begins to emerge from doing this deeper work. And then I also have a program coming up pretty soon called 30 Days of Breath Connection. That's just going to be daily practices, simple breath practices that allow you to learn how your breath can be utilized in your day-to-day life to really enhance your energy, optimize your health, bring you into states of presence, calm, anxiety and stress and things like that, and just how you can utilize your breath in the day-to-day to really enhance your overall experience of life. And so I'm really excited about that course. And of course, I'm always really grateful and excited to hold breathwork space and coaching space as well.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for this fun conversation. I'm wishing you, I hope that you took a lot of nuggets out of everything that you can directly bring into your life to bring in greater levels of connection with yourself and healing and creating your amazing and great love story and your own great life. Okay, sending you so much love.